Hello, welcome to the video vort. Today we will be speaking about what I believe is an extraordinary concept. You see, the Kabbalah teaches, as we've mentioned on the blog Kabbalah Wisdom many times, that there are three things that run us. The first is hopefully, ideally, our mind. The second is what's very common to most of us, and that is our emotions, what's called our heart. And generally speaking, we have two emotions. We have the emotion of love and the emotion of fear. Love is something I am attracted to. Fear is something I retract from. Love is something that will give me pleasure. Fear is something that will give me pain. But a human being obviously is no animal. We are very, very different to the animals. And not only are we different in the capacity to change our behavior, which as we know from dieting and from addiction is very difficult, because the heart says, give me that. There's a love. And the brain may know that that's not a good idea, but it's only when the desire to change is stronger than the desire for the thing that people change. That's why addicts have to hit rock bottom. The pain has to be worse than the pleasure. But with addicts, for example, it's not really the pain because addiction feels good. It's the shame. The shame has to be worse than the pleasure. So here we have a very simple understanding of how human beings work. On the right side, we want pleasure and pride. On the left side, we don't want pain and we don't want shame. And this balance of, is this thing pleasurable but not too shameful, or is the pride worth the pain or the shame, that is really what runs the entire human race. But the focus of this little talk is pride and shame. You see, we all want to, as my friend Mr. Lipschitz told me, he says he works with the neon light theory. Everybody wants their name in big neon lights. That's because we innately have a love for ourselves. When we're born and we're fed, we create an assumption that we are this kind of God. Look, I've been able to cry and I got this. Of course, it's all subconscious. By the time we're two, little 2-year-olds throw tantrums. Why? Because in their mind, they're like God. Everybody should be doing what they want because that's what they're used to. And so maybe when their parents hopefully don't give in to them and they become mollified, they become more normal, but part of that subconscious idea that I am godly or I am God, I am like a little king or queen, stays with them. And therefore, effectively, we all want just what we want because we want it. Not because that thing is good for us necessarily, but the very fact that I want it makes me want it. On the flip side is shame. We don't want people to feel bad about us, so we have an identity. We figure we are, usually will identify with our religion, with our nation, with our sex as a male or a female. And therefore, if somebody says to you, oh, you are, I don't know, God forbid, let's say somebody says, you're a dirty Jew. So, me being a Jew, I would take offense. Now, if somebody wasn't a Jew, they would say, well, I'm not a Jew, so why should I take offense? So you see, it's because I have a Jewish identity that I feel you're attacking me. But if I didn't think I was a Jew, it could be I was a Jew, but I didn't know I was a Jew. So somebody said, you're a terrible Christian. I would laugh at them. I'm not a Christian. So you see that who you think you are, you have this image. And then you don't want that image to go down. And this is a critical thing to understand. Because what happens in life is that sometimes you have nations with negative images. So for example, the Arabs, as a former PLO terrorist told me, what we don't often think about is what was the psychological effect of Yishmael being kicked out of the house. We know that Muhammad God bless him, changed the biblical narrative to say that it wasn't Isaac that was on the altar, it was Ishmael. So we see there's this deep, thousands of years kind of sibling jealousy that exists. And so what he said, which is probably true, he says Ishmael felt like garbage. Can you imagine getting kicked out of the house here? You think you're the firstborn. In fact, from Jewish wisdom, it says that it says in the Bible, Metzachik, he was like playing. So why would Sarah mind if he was playing with her son? But the answer is that he was actually pretending to shoot arrows. Oh, I'm pretending to shoot arrows. And really he was trying to kill this kid, which is like a classical sibling rivalry. But the thing is that when he was banished, he must have felt terrible, like I'm despicable, I've been chased out of the house, I have nothing, and it completely destroyed him. And so this is where shame becomes part of the identity of an individual. And it's very important to understand this, because many people, I would venture to say, perhaps at least half of the world, at least the adult world, have gone through life. As studies show, everybody's been bullied, and bullying is just shaming someone. So many people have internalized a negative belief about themselves. So really there are only 4 possibilities about the self-image, the self-belief. The first is, worst case scenario, like we find with children abandoned in these Romanian orphanages. So they're cared for, but they're not loved. They have no connection to anyone else. They never develop that pride in self. They just basically sit alone for their whole life. It's a tragedy. Because they don't love themselves, they don't care about themselves, they don't want anything good for themselves. The second is a normal case that a person develops a pride in himself, and then based on his society and to what extent he's indulged, like a spoiled child never is happy because they think that they deserve everything and they never have everything. And so to what extent they become unspoiled, to what extent they become appreciative of what they have, or you could even become spoiled as an adult. You can get delusions of grandeur from too much praise. There are various different things that can happen, but there's a balance between the pride and kind of reality. But then there's another spectrum. The other spectrum is the negative spectrum. It's not that I don't exist or I do exist, but within certain boundaries. It's that either a person gets depressed. Now, depression is self-shame. I am ashamed of something I perceive I should have done or shouldn't have done, and therefore I failed myself. And the, so to say, ego in Freudian terms really can be very harsh, and that's why people commit suicide, because the ego says you're evil, and it becomes a situation where the person despises themselves and they want to kill themselves because they hate themselves. Again, that person was born, in order to get depressed, you have to be born with pride. And so now you have this image of yourself, the positive image, and now you're upset at the positive image. The positive image didn't do what you wanted it to do. You're angry at it, you hate it, and therefore you kill it. But there's a worst case scenario, and this is people like, Hitler, and certainly Arabs have this problem, and I would venture to say Obama certainly has this problem. This is where a person has a shame-based identity. But this shame isn't depression. This shame is somebody shamed the person. So again, if I believe that what the person is saying is not true, it won't bother me, right? If somebody says, oh, you're a bad Christian, that won't bother me because I don't think I'm a Christian. But if that person says I'm a bad Jew, well, who's saying it? Let's say a Christian says it. Well, I'll think, what do you know about being a good Jew or not a good Jew? I don't take that. But let's say a fellow rabbi comes to me and says, you're a bad person. Well, then I'll take it very personal because I figure, well, he is somebody that I believe knows about good and bad, and therefore I trust his judgment, and therefore if he's saying that, it probably means that I am bad. Now usually, not usually, always if somebody says that, that's only because they've been shamed and they're jealous that you haven't been. But the point is that when there's external shame, when somebody makes you feel shame and you buy into that, because that's, let's say, a parent, because jealousy runs in families as well, parents to children, even mothers to babies, because the mother might feel shame and she might be jealous of this child that doesn't feel the shame, and jealousy is an insane motive to sort of rape the person and cause a sense of shame. That's really all rape is. It's not a desire for sex, it's a desire to shame. All of anti-Semitism is all about that people who feel ashamed are trying to shame others. Anti-Americanism, that's why I include Obama, who's always about shaming. He's busy lecturing and shaming everyone. So these are people that have internalized a shame-based identity. And therefore they're jealous of anybody else that doesn't have shame. And therefore their whole life is about one thing. And that's what a bully is. It's about shaming someone else. And of course, the mind being the servant of the emotion. Remember we said before that the battle is between the mind and the emotions. And the emotions usually win. And so therefore these people are driven by this terrible emotion of hate. And the critical thing that I would love for you to understand is the following. Never in the history of the world has there been or will there be somebody who shames somebody else out of love. You know, love doesn't see evil. I have 3 beautiful children. I love them very, very much. Now you can tell me my son did X. I still won't hurt him. Maybe I would try to teach him a lesson. It could be I would take away, let's say, computer time. But I would never shame him because I am not here to hurt that person. Shame is the most violent, vile, despicable abuse that exists. Why? Because if you slap someone, maybe you hurt his hand. But if you shame them, you've destroyed them. You're trying to attack their very being, their identity. And finally, the irony of the whole thing is that all 4 mechanisms are wrong. Because as we see that you can have pride in yourself and then you become a drug addict because you're busy taking care of yourself. So it's important that we choose, and I believe that this is the most important. In fact, I think this is the fundamental approach of Kabbalah and Chassidus. This is what it's aiming for. We have to have a dichotomy of who we are. As it says clearly in the Tanya, quoting from Kabbalah, we are 2 people in one. We have a divine being and we have an animal being. The divine being is good, is compassionate, is kind, is selfless, is truthful. And the animal being is selfish and it is prone to anger and hate and jealousy, as we have discussed, right? I know what I'm going to say is going to maybe shock people, but the fact is Hitler was also born with love. Nobody's born with the capacity to be evil unless somebody induced it in them. Somebody had to shame that person, make that person have a negative self-image. That person then becomes jealous of others. And so therefore we all have this tremendous inborn compassion, as neuroscientists say. By nature, we are compassionate people. But then something twists, and that is when we get bullied and we internalize the shame. And ultimately, I think that everything really is there for our benefit. Because if we just remain delusional that we're perfect, we're not capable of really growing. As my friend Dr. Kulik, great psychiatrist, says, that what has been discovered is through pain comes growth, and through great pain comes great growth. But the final kind of practical message is this. Love the divine, the good within you, the compassion, the idealism within you. Love that. That's beautiful, and that's you, and that is what will bring out the best of you and make the world a better place. But at the same time, despise, and if you need be shamed, the evil in you. Because the evil, the ego, that part that says, I want it because I want it, and that's enough reason to have it, that is evil. That leads to kind of narcissism and jealousy. And therefore we have to say, I hate you. I hate that part of me which is selfish and doesn't care about another, cares about myself only and doesn't care about the other. So in summary, to help you out, perhaps you can see me as somebody who you can trust, and therefore you can internalize this. Your divine soul, your soul, who you really are, is God himself. It's beautiful. You're filled with love. You're filled with idealism. You are basically God on earth. But your animal soul has Hitler inside of it. It's completely sick, disgusting, and evil. And that's not who you want to be. You want to be your godly soul. Your animal soul is something that you have to overcome. Whenever you find yourself being angry, feel that this is something good from God, even if you don't know why. And you will always be the compassionate and loving you.